Okay, today is a continuation of the box lot items that I had gotten out. I am going to be taking apart this audio Recotton S-Video switch. These are all brass. There are small black Phillips head screws in the back, seam. I'm imagining when the screws come out, I can just pull it apart. These AB switches all have seams. I'll be prying them apart with a chisel and a hammer. Same with this one, and the same with this one. A seam here and a seam here. Okay, this is a continuation of the box lot items. I'll be taking these 5 items apart for their various parts that are on the inside. I'm assuming circuit boards. I'm assuming brass. There are some steel screws on this one device. These 3 will come apart with chisel and hammer. I'm not assuming any copper involved. I'm just assuming brass and circuit boards. So let's get to it. I do not have an electric screwdriver. I will just be using the old-fashioned way. It should be rather quick. Something is to be said about magnified screwdrivers. They hold, and at the same time, they won't let go. It's nice to have a magnet by you while you're tearing things down so that you can always keep track of where the screws went. I like to keep track of everything that comes off of the device so that it makes for easy cleanup. I see other scrappers that just let the screws fly. And I imagine that they do go back behind themselves later off camera and clean up. To me, everything you're taking off can be counted as scrap value. And so I even take in the screws to the scrap yard and scrap them out. I had at one time a big plan to sit down with all the screws, the different screws that I was taking out. Yeah, it's Phillips head, there's hex head, there's all kinds of different types of screws that put together electronics. And my vision, it's not a bad vision, but I just lost heart in it one day and just took all the screws to the yard and let them have them. I didn't let them have them, but I took them in as scrap metal and put them in the big pile, and there they went. But the vision was to sit down and separate them all out by type, by size, group them together, put them up on eBay, and try to resell them for, whatever value I could post them as. I still think I should have done that. I could have gotten probably some monies out of that process. There's nothing necessarily to test to make sure the screw works. Like you would these devices, I'd have to hook them up with some kind of power supply, which these devices did not come with a power supply. I would have to hook them up and test them, and then certify them to whatever buyer I say, hey, it works for me, it should work for you. So, you don't really have to do that with a screw, technically. You don't want to be selling screws that are stripped. All right, so all these are now removed, so fingers crossed I should just be able to pull it apart, right? Didn't happen. Screws may actually have been holding on whatever's back there to it, like the plate that's holding on all these plug-ins could actually have been what the screws were doing. So the next thing is to undo these bottom pieces here to see if there's screws underneath there, and they're not. I just put this closer to my face and I see screws here. So there are 2 screws up there and 1 screw down here. So I have more to unscrew. It's something that you'll notice in electronics, if you are scrapping electronics, is there are a plethora of screws in electronics. It's amazing how many screws it takes just for a printer alone. If you've ever scrapped a printer out, there are a ton of screws all over the printer. Now these screws, although they're black in paint, they could be magnetic stainless steel, they could be stainless steel, they could be brass, they could be aluminum. I've seen screws that are actually aluminum. So it depends on what you're taking apart as to what the screw is going to be. Sometimes what you can do is look up the device you're taking apart on the internet and get a spec sheet from it. And with the spec sheet would come a parts sheet. And from that, you'll be able to determine what each part is and hopefully the composition of each part, to which you will then say, according to this spec sheet, this device is made with stainless steel screws, and therefore you can take it to the yard and say, these are stainless steel screws. All right, I got a majority of these loose. There wasn't a screw here, but there is a pad here. So I'm wondering if during production they either did this on purpose to hide the last screw, or it was just put here on an afterthought because they'd forgotten the last screw. And sure enough, there is the last screw. And that might have been a security feature as well, to not let someone take it apart. They may not know to look underneath the pads. So the last screw is out. And now the back plane comes off. There is nothing here that is worth keeping. This is just the plastic part. There are some letters up here in the corner that might identify this piece. There is a 07 ABS in the corner for recycling. So that would have to be noted in your recycling bin. Here is a circuit board. There are no screws that I can tell in the circuit board. There were places where the screws were in the device. All right, let's see if I can pull the board off. And these screws were attached to the back plane. We have to get all these little doodads out and through. Slowly coming. I don't want to disturb much of the board. I don't want to crack anything. I don't want to break anything because I'm trying to get the most value that I can out of this. And you can see how it's slowly starting to come. Push these connectors through the hole here. Wiggle it a little bit. Eventually pop it out. Nothing has broken. Again, this is marked with ABS 07 for recycling. You have to put that in the right bin for your recycling company. I can also get the name off of that top of that device and figure out whether these screws are stainless steel or not if I would want to do that. Here's a back plane. Does not appear to be affixed by any screws. It's all soldered down there. It comes through the backboard, soldered down to it, so I don't really want to crack it apart, not just yet. Nothing appears. There's no IC chips on the back side. There's no IC chips on the front side. Doesn't appear to be any brass that I can get to at the moment. What I may do is take my heat gun and melt all this out so that all these fall out. There is brass inside of these connector pin holes, and there's very possible that there's brass behind this black plastic that we can't see behind it. Something that would affix it to the board, and then once it's on the board, it's there. These are switch push buttons. With most switch push buttons, there's a silver involved. There may be silver underlying here to allow the connection. Let me test this silver. Okay, all that is steel. These are configured like they're IC chips. No, it just says switch 1, switch 2, switch 3, and switch 4. It does appear to be something inside. So at a later date, I'm going to take the glue gun or the heat gun and take these off the board. At least take one off the board so I can see what's inside this black box. There's a black box right there. So I'm going to take that. I'll take that off so I can see what's inside that box. I am also probably going to take these off as well. So that's what was inside that switch. Now we're going to come to another one. This one has no screws. I'm going to put it in the vise and open it up with a chisel and a hammer. All right, device is open. There's nothing on this end. It's just plastic. Looking at the plastic, I don't see any recycle numbers on the plastic. There's no, it does say Radio Shack on the back, but I don't see any recycle numbers on it. I'll probably assume it's the same type. All right, there are screws inside of here. This back plane appears to be copper. Appears to be 2 screws. Yep, I'm going to try to see if I can get these 2 screws out. All right, screws are out. Black pan is off. Again, I don't see any markings for recycling. Here is a circuit board. Circuit board did have, or it does have copper on this end. Although it is a circuit board, it's on there. I'm not sure. Again, with these switches. All right, these switches look like IC chips. They have the same leggings on as IC chips. So I'll have to get the glue gun, or I keep saying glue gun, but the heat gun, and take this stuff off. These are all switches again. Switches most times in electronics have silver in them. These pieces here are steel. This back plane is steel. These other pieces are not magnetic. But this big bar here is steel, this is steel, and you've got the circuit board, and you've got the switches on the circuit board. I'm going to try to get all this taken apart because the steel takes out value away from the circuit board. Okay, I'm going to continue on the project. I got distracted a bit. Now I'm going to finish these 3 items. The item that I left off with was this ABC switch, brass. This is steel, this is steel, this is steel. Magnet sticks here. Magnet does not stick here. Sticks here, sticks here. I left off saying that I will get the heat gun and take off these as much as possible to separate them from the brass so I can get some value out of this, and then this will be thrown into my low grade board pile. All right, here's the next one. It's another AB switch. I have a feeling it's gonna look just like the rest of these. There are no screws. I'll have to use the chisel and hammer into the seam to break this open. Broke the seam on both ends, and it's come apart. As I've done in previous videos, I'm looking for the inside the plastic to see if there are any recycling symbols. I don't see anything on this one. It'll probably still end up going with the rest of them. There are no screws here, but this is a steel box. Pretty sure that's going to be steel. I'm going to check it out in a minute. That's the switch. Out comes the box. Again, no markings for recycling. I'm going to test the box. Yep, everything sticks to the magnet. So this entire box is steel. These connection points do not stick, so they may be brass, they may be zinc, as I've heard another scrapper call them, throw them in with zinc cast. So I will need to test that at a later date to determine what that actually is. There is a seam on this container. There are soldering points. I will now attempt to crack open this box in hopes to get the goodies on the inside. Take off my real glasses, put on my safety glasses. It's starting to split open. Did not secure it tight enough. All right, I'm going to hammer it on the seams. Again, not secured very well. Trying to break off those solder joints. I'm actually cracking into it more than I wanted to. I'm gonna see if I can pry it open on my own. It does appear to be loose. I'm gonna take the wire snips and see if I can help bend it back a bit. It is coming open. There is a circuit board inside. The piece doesn't fit well in the vise, or I would have put it back in the vise. This is solid steel, so this will go in my steel bin. And now we see the circuit board that's connected to the connector pins there, brass connections. I'm assuming brass connections. Let's see if I can break off that outer shell. You get the sneaky suspicion that manufacturers didn't want this taken apart. Obvious reasons, you know, it's something small, doesn't need to be taken apart. If it actually breaks down or whatever, probably better off just buying a brand new one. It's nice to get snips that actually fit. And as you know me by now, if you're watching some videos, I don't use gloves. I should, but I don't like the way the gloves feel on my hands. They limit restrictions that my fingers can feel from the pieces, and so I just don't use the gloves. I've tried before, they don't work out. And so to my detriment, I end up cutting myself sometimes, but we heal, the body's resilient. It moves on. Don't know whether you've noticed or not, but my dog wants to get in the video. She keeps walking by, see what's going on. This is slowly peeling. I am gonna try to put it back in the vise. Attempt to peel off that edge a little more with the chisel. I didn't lock it down very tight. I want like a third hand to hold on to the piece while I work my way around to work this piece out. Just applying pressure where I can. Yeah, that one slipped really good. It appears to be another box. Like this was the outer shell, and there's another piece of metal here. So what I think I'm gonna do, open this up as far as I can. Slip it in to where the connectors are touching, and that bottom box is touching. Tighten it up, hold it in place, and then use the chisel and the hammer to try to get that piece up and off. And there it went. And this is, again, we've established as steel, sticks to the magnet, goes in the steel bucket. This gets unwound, and we take another look at the construction, figuring out how to get one piece away from the other. And this is all steel, still it's steel. That's steel. These pieces do not attract. I would like to get those off. So we're going to, I don't want to fight against the vise. There's a small seam right here. If I put this back in the vise, I might be able to knock straight through it, but I'll be fighting against the vise to hold it together. You can see the vise bending, not the vise bending, but the vise bending in the middle at each strike. Those items bent, and look at there, came right off the board. The board is still in there. I would like to get the board out. It's a nice smell to it. It's like it's been burnt. I probably shouldn't have smelled it, but you just can't help it. You're smelling something, it smells weird, and you just smell it. All right, using brute force again to pull back the steel. There's the board. The board is in disarray. It is also soldered quite nicely to the steel. This part, my yard does not want computer board attached to their steel. And this board is in such, as messed up and small as it is, I'm just gonna take it off the steel. Circuit board basically splintered up too small to even think about putting it in a low-grade board box. It's just splintered too much. I would probably just put this in the regular trash. I may put it in my low-grade board box and just take it into the recycle area anyway. A lot of this splintered up too much to get any worth out of it. It's one of the low parts about taking something apart is sometimes it comes apart so much that it's just not worth anything. This is, again, would go straight steel. It goes straight into my steel box.